Have you ever felt overwhelmed by the chaos of life, reacting impulsively to every little trigger without a moment's thought? In today's fast-paced world, it's easy to get swept up in the storm of emotions, losing sight of our inner peace and power. But what if there was a way to rise above the noise and turmoil, to remain calm and centered no matter what life throws at you? When we react impulsively to situations, we give away our power, allowing external circumstances to control our inner state. But what if we could master our minds instead? What if we could train ourselves to respond with silence instead of rage, to rise above the noise and maintain our peace no matter what happens around us? Buddhist wisdom offers a profound alternative: the ability to remain still, not taking the bait, and watching the storm without becoming it. As the Buddha once said, "You will not be punished for your anger, you will be punished by your anger." These words hold a powerful truth that can transform the way you react to the world. This is the essence of Buddhist wisdom: to achieve a state of being untouchable, unshakable, and deeply calm. The teachings we're about to explore will guide you on this transformative journey. If you're tired of being triggered, if you're ready to take back your power and find lasting peace, then listen closely. These 7 powerful lessons will change the way you react to the world forever. The first lesson is about detachment, not from love or compassion, but from expectations and control. Most people live like leaves in the wind, tossed around by opinions, emotions, and circumstances they cannot control. One harsh word or small failure can shatter their mood and make them question their worth. This happens because they're attached to approval, success, comfort, reputation, and outcomes. Buddhism refers to this as upadana, or clinging, and it's the root of suffering. The Buddha taught that suffering doesn't come from what happens to us, but from how tightly we cling to what we want to happen. We cling to being liked, to being right, to being in control, and every time life doesn't meet our expectations, our peace is shattered. But when we practice detachment, something remarkable happens. We realize that nothing outside of us has the power to disturb our inner stillness unless we give it that power. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you care deeply but with wisdom. You show up with love, act with intention, but no longer tie your identity to the result. Whether someone praises you or insults you, it doesn't move you. Your center remains still. This is not coldness. This is clarity. When you stop reacting emotionally to everything, you create space. And in that space, peace grows. Imagine being like a tree in a storm, rooted, calm, and unshaken. If someone insults you, you don't need to respond because you understand their words are a reflection of them, not you. If someone praises you, you smile the same way because you know your value was never based on what anyone thought in the first place. This is inner power. The person who no longer depends on anything external to feel okay becomes untouchable. You don't react, you don't resist, you observe, breathe, and let go. In that letting go, you stop being controlled by the world and start mastering yourself. That's when true peace begins, and from that peace, unshakable power rises. The journey to becoming untriggerable starts with understanding these profound teachings and applying them in your daily life. Are you ready to begin? Lesson 1. Detachment is the key to inner power. In the heart of Buddhist philosophy lies a profound concept known as upadana, which translates to clinging or grasping. This isn't merely a philosophical abstraction, it's a vivid description of a common human experience. How often do we find ourselves clinging to approval, success, comfort, reputation, and specific outcomes? These attachments are the invisible threads that bind us to suffering. When someone speaks harshly to us, our self-worth shatters. When life veers off the path we meticulously planned, anxiety consumes us. This isn't because these external factors inherently possess the power to wound us, it's because we've handed them that power through our clinging. Understanding upadana, the root of suffering. The Buddha taught that suffering doesn't originate from external events themselves. It arises from the vice-like grip we maintain on our expectations of how those events should unfold. We cling to being liked, to being right, to being in control, and every time reality diverges from our script, our peace fractures. Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff, fingers desperately gripping the crumbling rock. The fall isn't inevitable until we refuse to release our hold on something that was never solid ground to begin with. This isn't a call to stop caring about your work or relationships. It's an invitation to examine the nature of your attachment. When you cling to approval, you're essentially saying, "My worth is contingent on your acknowledgement." When you cling to control, you're declaring, "My peace depends on the world conforming to my preferences." These are fragile foundations for happiness, easily eroded by the unpredictable currents of life. But what does this mean in practical terms? Let's consider a familiar scenario. You've worked tirelessly on a project, pouring your creativity and energy into it. You present it to your colleagues, eager for validation. Instead of praise, you're met with criticism. The sting isn't just from the words themselves, it's from the shattered expectation that your hard work would be recognized. You clung to the outcome of approval, and when it wasn't forthcoming, suffering followed. The illusion of external happiness. Our culture has woven an intricate tapestry of conditional happiness. If I get this promotion, I'll be fulfilled. If my partner loves me in this specific way, I'll feel secure. If I achieve this goal, my life will finally make sense. These statements aren't merely aspirations, they're transactions. We're bargaining with the universe, offering our effort in exchange for a specific emotional payout. The problem, as Buddhism so elegantly highlights, is that this happiness is rented, not owned. It's a lease agreement with life, and the terms are never fully within our control. A promotion might bring momentary joy, but it also introduces new pressures and expectations. A partner's love, no matter how deep, can never singularly answer your emotional needs if you've outsourced your sense of worth to their affection. This isn't a critique of ambition or connection. It's a wake-up call to recognize that when we anchor our happiness to external validation, we're setting ourselves adrift on a sea of uncertainty. The winds of other people's moods, life's unpredictability, and our own shifting desires will constantly threaten to capsize us. The freedom of detachment, a misunderstood concept. Before we proceed, it's crucial to dispel a common misunderstanding. Detachment, as understood in Buddhist practice, isn't synonymous with apathy or emotional numbness. It doesn't mean withdrawing from the world or severing meaningful connections. Quite the contrary. Detachment is the art of engaging fully with life while simultaneously releasing your fixation on the outcome. It's the difference between holding a conversation with a friend because you care about their well-being and holding the conversation because you're desperate for their approval. It's the distinction between pursuing a career you love because it aligns with your values and chasing that career because you fear the shame of failure. When you practice detachment from expectations and control, something transformative occurs. You begin to realize that your inner stillness isn't at the mercy of external chaos. A colleague's criticism no longer feels like a personal affront to your identity. A friend's temporary anger doesn't trigger a proportional emotional response within you. This isn't because you've become cold or unfeeling, it's because you've transferred the locus of control from the unpredictable external world to the steadiness of your own awareness. Detachment in action. Everyday applications. How does this translate to the messy, vibrant reality of daily life? Let's explore specific scenarios where detachment can be both practiced and profoundly liberating. You've likely experienced this. Someone offers a critique of your work, appearance, or decisions, and immediately a storm erupts within you. Your mind races to defend itself, crafting rebuttals and justifications. Your heart pounds, your face flushes, and for hours afterward, you're preoccupied with the exchange. When facing criticism, with detachment, the landscape changes. When faced with criticism, you acknowledge the emotions that arise: disappointment, hurt, frustration, but you don't fuse with them. You recognize that the critic's words are a projection of their own perspectives, experiences, and perhaps even their unmet needs. You might think, this person's feedback reflects their values, not the entirety of my worth. You respond thoughtfully rather than reactively, preserving both your dignity and your peace.
In relationships,
Relationships are fertile ground for clinging. We cling to partners to fulfill our emotional needs, to friends to validate our sense of belonging, to family to mirror the image of ourselves we hope to see. When these expectations aren't met, when a partner is distant, a friend cancels plans, a family member disagrees, suffering follows. Amidst failure and loss, detachment in relationships doesn't mean emotional withdrawal. It means showing up with love and presence without binding your self-worth to the other person's behavior. You offer compassion without keeping score of whether it's reciprocated. You enjoy moments of connection without fearing moments of separation. In this space of non-attachment, relationships paradoxically become more authentic and fulfilling. Failure and loss are inevitable, yet our clinging turns them into sources of devastation. We cling to the narrative of success as the cornerstone of our identity. We cling to possessions, roles, and relationships as bulwarks against the fear of insignificance. When you practice detachment from outcomes, failure becomes a teacher rather than a torturer. Loss becomes a passage rather than a prison. Imagine losing a job you cherish. Instead of clinging to the identity of successful professional, you recognize that your worth extends beyond any single role. You grieve the loss, yes, but you don't become consumed by it. You adapt, you grow, you rediscover yourself in new contexts. Detachment isn't a destination marked by a sudden, enlightened detachment from all worldly concerns. It's a path, composed of small, deliberate steps that gradually reshape your relationship with attachment and suffering. Here are practices to help you walk this path. Cultivating detachment. Practical steps. Mindful self-reflection. Set aside time each day for quiet reflection. Ask yourself, what am I clinging to right now? Approval? Control? A specific outcome? What would it feel like to release this attachment, even partially? Journaling your responses can deepen this process, creating a tangible record of your inner landscape and the gradual shifts that occur over time. How has this clinging influenced my emotions and decisions today? The practice of non-attachment in daily activities. Choose a routine activity, washing dishes, walking to work, eating a meal, and practice doing it without attachment to the outcome. If you're washing dishes, fully engage with the sensation of water, the motion of your hands, the sight of bubbles. Release any mental narratives about how quickly you should finish or how perfectly the dishes should be cleaned. This simple exercise trains your mind to focus on the present moment rather than fixating on future results. Releasing the need for control. Identify an area of your life where you often struggle to relinquish control, perhaps a collaborative project at work or a family decision. Consciously choose to step back, allowing others to take the lead. Observe your emotional responses without judgment. Notice how the world doesn't collapse when you're not micromanaging every detail. This practice builds trust in the capacity of others and in your own ability to handle uncertainty. Take a few minutes to visualize the impermanent nature of all things. Imagine a beautiful flower blooming vibrant, fragrant, perfect in its form. Now imagine it wilting, petals falling, stem weakening. Reflect on how the flower's beauty wasn't diminished by its impermanence, but was, in fact, enhanced by it. Apply this visualization to your own attachments. See how your prized possessions, achievements, and relationships are equally temporary, and how this truth frees you from the burden of clinging. Visualization of impermanence. Lesson 2. Observe, don't absorb. The art of mindful observation. At the core of Buddhist practice lies a transformative skill, the ability to observe without absorbing. In our interconnected world, we're constantly bombarded by emotions, words, and energies, some pleasant, many unpleasant. People project their pain, insecurities, and anger, creating situations that feel overwhelming or unfair. Most of us absorb these energies, carrying them in our chests, letting them swirl in our minds, until we become what we reacted to. But Buddhism offers a radical alternative. We can observe the storm without becoming it. This isn't a passive approach, it's an active practice of mindfulness rooted in the understanding that you are not your thoughts or emotions. You are the awareness behind them, the silent observer that remains steady no matter how loud the mind becomes. When someone speaks with anger, you notice the anger, but don't catch it. When criticism comes your way, you observe its impact on your body and mind, but don't fuse with the reaction. This distinction between observing and observing is the foundation of inner freedom. Why we absorb: the habit of emotional reactivity. Our tendency to absorb external energies is deeply ingrained. Evolutionarily, it made sense. Our ancestors needed to react quickly to threats. Anger could signal danger, fear could trigger life-saving flight. But in modern life, this reactivity often works against us. A colleague's sharp remark triggers a cascade of self-doubt. A stranger's rudeness ignites fury. We absorb these energies not because they're inherently harmful, but because we've trained ourselves to do so over years of unexamined responses. This absorption has consequences. When we take on others' emotions, we become emotionally exhausted. We carry the weight of their pain, their anger, their stress. We react in ways that perpetuate cycles of negativity, returning anger with anger, defensiveness with defensiveness. The world becomes a mirror, reflecting back to us the chaos we've absorbed. And in this chaos, our peace is constantly at risk. The neuroscience of observation versus absorption. Modern science aligns with ancient wisdom here. Neuroimaging studies show that when we react emotionally to a stimulus, the amygdala, a brain region involved in processing fear and anger, becomes hyperactive. This triggers a fight-or-flight response, flooding our bodies with stress hormones. But when we observe without absorbing, something different happens. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational thought and emotional regulation, engages. This creates space between stimulus and response, allowing us to choose how we react. Mindfulness practices, like Vipassana meditation, strengthen this neural pathway. By repeatedly choosing observation over absorption, we rewire our brains. Over time, the amygdala's reactivity diminishes, and the prefrontal cortex becomes more dominant. We're no longer slaves to our immediate emotional impulses. We become, in a very real sense, emotionally resilient. Practical applications: observing in daily life. In personal relationships, think of a moment when a loved one snapped at you. Perhaps they were stressed from work, frustrated with a situation unrelated to you. If you absorbed their anger, you might have responded with hurt or defensiveness, escalating the conflict. But with observation, you notice their anger without taking it personally. You see it as a temporary wave passing through their experience, not a reflection of your worth. You might respond with compassion. You seem upset. Would you like to talk about it? This doesn't mean enabling toxic behavior. It means responding skillfully rather than reactively. At work, workplaces are fertile ground for emotional absorption. A boss's criticism can trigger imposter syndrome. A coworker's passive-aggressive comment can ruin your day. By observing these interactions without absorbing the negative energy, you maintain professional clarity. You acknowledge the feedback without letting it define your self-worth. You address the comment without internalizing the emotion behind it. This preserves your mental bandwidth for productive problem-solving rather than emotional rumination. In social media and public spaces, we're constantly exposed to opinions and energies online and in public. An inflammatory post, a heated argument in a comment section, these can trigger strong reactions. With observation, you scroll past without getting drawn in. You notice the emotions the content stirs in you. Frustration, indignation, but you don't dwell. You maintain your inner equilibrium, refusing to let external chaos disrupt your peace. The practice of Vipassana meditation. Vipassana, or insight meditation, is a powerful tool for cultivating the ability to observe without absorbing. Here's a simplified version of the practice. Sit comfortably. Find a quiet space where you won't be disturbed. Sit in a posture that's alert yet relaxed. 2. Focus on the breath. Bring your attention to the sensation of breathing. Notice the coolness of the air as you inhale, the warmth as you exhale. Don't force deep breaths, simply observe the natural rhythm. Observe thoughts and sensations. When thoughts arise, and they will note them without judgment, label them mentally as thinking and return to the breath. If physical sensations arise, itching, tingling, discomfort, observe them in the same way, note sensation, and return to the breath. 4. Create space. The goal isn't to eliminate thoughts or sensations, but to create space between them and your reaction to them. With practice, you'll notice that thoughts and sensations come and go like clouds in the sky, leaving no trace if you don't grasp. 5. Practice regularly. Even 5 minutes a day can yield noticeable changes. Consistency is more important than duration. Common challenges and solutions. Challenge 1. I can't stop my mind from wandering. Solution. This is normal. The mind's tendency to wander is called monkey mind in Buddhist tradition. When you notice it, gently return to the breath. Each return is a victory, a strengthening of your observer muscle. Challenge 2. Observing feels cold or disconnected. Solution. Observing isn't about shutting down emotions, but about relating to them differently. You can observe sadness, for example, while still acknowledging its presence. Think of it as holding the emotion gently in your awareness rather than being consumed by it. Challenge 3. I'm afraid I'll become passive if I don't react. Solution. Observing without absorbing doesn't mean inaction. It means responding skillfully. Sometimes the wisest response is silence, or a later, thoughtful reply. Other times it's decisive action, but action rooted in clarity rather than reactivity. Deepening the practice. Metaphors for understanding. The still lake metaphor. Imagine a lake so still it mirrors the sky perfectly. When a stone is thrown in, ripples form, but they always return to stillness. Your mind is like this lake. Emotions and thoughts are the ripples. With practice, you can watch them arise and fall without losing the stillness beneath. The burning coal metaphor. If someone hands you a burning coal, you have a choice: grab it and be burned, or refuse it and walk away. Absorbing others' negative energy is like grabbing the coal. Observing is like recognizing what it is and letting it be. The transformative power of observation. When you master the art of observing without absorbing, you transform your relationship with the world. You become like a mirror, reflecting experiences without retaining them. People may project their pain onto you, but it slides off without leaving a mark. Challenges arise, but they no longer derail your inner peace. This isn't about becoming emotionless, it's about becoming emotionally wise. You experience the full spectrum of human feeling: joy, sorrow, anger, fear. But you don't become imprisoned by them. You observe, you breathe, you respond from a place of clarity, and in doing so, you reclaim your power. If I were to expand this into 2,000 words, I would elaborate each section with more detailed examples and research. 2. Add subsections on how different cultural contexts influence our tendency to absorb emotions. 3. Include interviews or case studies, hypothetical or real, of people who've transformed their lives through this practice. 4. Explore related psychological concepts like emotional contagion and how observation mitigates it. Provide a 30-day challenge for practicing observation in daily life, with daily prompts and reflections. Lesson 3. The power is always in the pause. The moment between stimulus and response, in the quiet space between what happens to us and how we respond, lies a world of possibility. Most people miss it. They're carried away by the surge of emotion, reacting impulsively before the mind has time to catch up. But the Buddha understood that this tiny moment, the pause between stimulus and response, holds the key to freedom. It's the difference between a life lived reactively and one lived intentionally. This pause isn't merely a delay, it's a gateway to choice. When someone insults you, the initial surge of anger is automatic. But in that pause, you can choose not to feed the flame. You can choose to breathe, to observe the anger rising like a wave, and to let it pass without acting on it. This isn't about suppressing emotion, it's about transforming it. By inserting a pause, you break the chain of cause and effect, rewriting the script of your reactions. Why we react without pausing. Our brains are wired for efficiency. When faced with a threat, real or perceived, the amygdala hijacks our nervous system, triggering a fight-or-flight response. This was useful when our ancestors encountered predators, but in modern life, it often backfires. A critical email, a traffic jam, a disagreement with a friend. These situations aren't life-threatening, but our brains treat them as such. We react before we think, and regret follows. Moreover, society conditions us to value quick responses. We're praised for snapping back at insults, for defending ourselves at all costs. But this culture of reactivity overlooks a crucial truth. The quality of our lives isn't determined by what happens to us, but by how we respond. And the pause is where this response is born. The neuroscience of the pause. Research in neuroscience supports this ancient wisdom. Studies show that mindfulness practices, which cultivate the pause, increase gray matter density in the prefrontal cortex, an area associated with decision-making, emotion regulation, and impulse control. Meanwhile, the amygdala's reactivity decreases. This means that with practice, we literally rewire our brains to be less reactive and more responsive. When you pause, you activate the brain's default mode network, which is responsible for self-referential thought and mental time travel. This allows you to step outside the immediate emotional experience and consider a broader perspective. You're no longer a slave to the present moment, but become its conscious navigator. Cultivating the pause. Practical exercises. Breath awareness. The simplest way to cultivate the pause is through conscious breathing. When triggered, immediately direct your attention to your breath. Notice its rhythm, depth and texture. Count each inhale and exhale slowly. Inhale 1, exhale 1, inhale 2. Continue for 10 breaths. This anchors you in the present moment, creating space between stimulus and response. The STOP technique, a practical acronym from mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR. Stop what you're doing. Take a breath. Observe what's happening in your body and mind. Proceed with awareness. This technique can be practiced anywhere, during a heated conversation, in traffic, or when opening a difficult email. It's a micro-pause that interrupts the reactivity cycle. Meditation on the pause. Set aside dedicated time for this practice. Sit comfortably with your eyes closed. Visualize a scenario that typically triggers you, e.g., someone criticizing your work. Allow the initial emotional response to arise. 4. Focus on the physical sensations of this emotion. Tightness in the chest, heat in the face. Now mentally insert a pause. Imagine a gap opening between the emotion and your response. In this gap, whisper to yourself, I choose how to respond. 7. Notice how the emotional intensity diminishes. Repeat this meditation daily for 2 weeks. You'll likely notice a marked difference in your ability to pause during real-life triggers. The transformative power of the pause. The pause isn't just a moment of delay, it's a catalyst for transformation. Here's how. Breaking the cycle of suffering. Most suffering begins with unexamined reactions. We say things we don't mean, act on impulses we later regret. Each reaction reinforces neural pathways, making future reactions more likely. But when you insert a pause, you break this cycle. You introduce novelty into the nervous system, allowing new pathways to form. Over time, reactivity diminishes, and responsiveness becomes your default mode. Developing emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, the ability to recognize, understand, and manage your own emotions and those of others, thrives in the pause. When you pause, you gain clarity about what you're feeling and why. You can identify anger masking hurt, fear disguised as aggression. This self-awareness allows you to respond in ways that honor your emotions without being controlled by them. Enhancing relationships. In relationships, the pause is a gift. It prevents reactive words from creating lasting wounds. When a partner expresses frustration, the pause allows you to hear their pain rather than defending against it. It transforms conflicts from battlegrounds into opportunities for connection. Over time, this habit of pausing can rebuild trust and foster deeper intimacy. Common challenges in cultivating the pause. Challenge 1. I forget to pause in the heat of the moment. Solution: prepare in advance. Identify common triggers and mentally rehearse pausing. Create external reminders, sticky notes with "breathe" written on them, or a wristband that serves as a tactile prompt. The more you practice pausing when untriggered, the more likely you'll remember to do so when triggered. Challenge 2. Pausing feels unnatural or forced. Solution: start small. Even a half-second pause is a victory. Gradually extend it as you become more comfortable. Think of it not as an interruption but as a reset, a moment to gather resources before responding. Challenge 3. I worry that pausing will make me appear weak or indecisive. Solution: the pause isn't about inaction but about wise action. When you respond from a place of clarity, your words and actions carry more weight. People may initially misinterpret the pause, but over time, they'll recognize it as a sign of strength and self-assurance. The pause as a spiritual practice. In Buddhist tradition, the pause is more than a psychological tool. It's a spiritual practice. It's the moment when you remember your true nature as awareness, separate from the drama of thoughts and emotions. Each pause is a mini awakening, a return to your center. Over time, these moments accumulate, gradually revealing the steady light of your awareness beneath the waves of reactivity. The ripple effect of the pause. The benefits of cultivating the pause extend beyond your personal well-being. When you pause, you model a different way of being in the world. Your calm response to provocation can de-escalate conflicts and inspire others to do the same. In a culture increasingly defined by reactivity, the pause becomes a revolutionary act, a silent assertion that peace is possible, one moment at a time. If I were to expand this into 2,000 words, I would include more detailed neuroscience research on how the pause affects brain plasticity. 2. Add case studies of individuals or organizations that transformed their communication through pausing. 3. Explore cultural variations in how the pause is perceived and valued. 4. Provide a 14-day challenge with specific exercises for each day to strengthen the pause. Discuss philosophical perspectives on free will and how the pause relates to it. Lesson 4. Let the fire burn out on its own. The flame of anger and the art of non-fuel. In the intricate dance of human interactions, anger often emerges as a blazing flame, threatening to consume all in its path. When someone directs anger toward us, our instinctual response is to mirror it, to meet fire with fire, as if our own fury could somehow extinguish theirs. But this is a misconception. Anger, like any fire, requires fuel to sustain itself. When we react with our own anger, we're not dousing the flames, we're feeding them, creating a conflagration that engulfs both parties. The Buddha's wisdom offers a radical alternative. Let the fire burn out on its own. This doesn't mean passively accepting abuse or injustice. It means refusing to add fuel to the flames. When someone hurls anger at you, they're handing you a torch filled with their own pain, frustration, and suffering. You have a choice. Grab the torch and let it consume you, or let it fall to the ground, where it will eventually die out, starved of the oxygen it needs to thrive. This practice of non-fuel isn't about suppressing your emotions or allowing others to walk over you. It's about recognizing that responding to anger with anger only perpetuates the cycle of suffering. It's about choosing, with conscious awareness, to break that cycle and protect your inner peace. The nature of anger, a temporary storm. Anger, like all emotions, is impermanent. It arises from a complex interplay of factors: unmet needs, past hurts, miscommunication, fear, and it will subside given time and the absence of fuel. When someone is angry with you, their anger is more about them than it is about you. It's a reflection of their internal state, their unmet expectations, their suffering. Recognizing this doesn't mean minimizing the impact of their words or actions on you. It means understanding that their anger isn't a permanent fixture, it's a temporary storm passing through their consciousness. When you refuse to engage with their anger, you're not ignoring it. You're allowing it to exist without validation. Without the oxygen of your reactive response, you're creating space for it to run its course naturally, without escalation. This isn't weakness, it's a profound form of strength, rooted in self-awareness and emotional mastery. The cost of engaging with anger. When we meet anger with anger, we pay a steep price. The immediate gratification of venting our frustration is followed by a cascade of negative consequences: emotional exhaustion. Anger is draining. It consumes your energy, leaving you mentally and physically exhausted. Relationship damage. Reactive anger often leads to hurtful words and actions that can fracture relationships, sometimes beyond repair. Loss of peace. Engaging in angry exchanges creates inner turmoil, disturbing your peace and leaving you ruminating long after the incident. Reinforcement of negative patterns. Each time you react angrily, you strengthen neural pathways associated with reactivity, making future outbursts more likely. By choosing not to engage, you protect yourself from these consequences. You maintain your emotional equilibrium and preserve your peace, even in the face of provocation. Practical strategies for letting the fire burn out. Pause and breathe. When confronted with anger, your first response should be to pause. Take a deep breath, anchoring yourself in the present moment. This simple act creates space between stimulus and response, preventing you from reacting impulsively. In that space, remind yourself, this is their anger, not mine. I choose not to fuel it. 2. Observe without judgment. Use the skills cultivated in previous lessons to observe the anger without absorbing it. Notice the physical sensations it triggers in you: tightness in the chest, heat in the face. Acknowledge them without judgment, then let them pass. Recognize that the anger is a wave, and waves eventually recede. 3. Respond with compassion. Compassion isn't about condoning hurtful behavior. It's about recognizing the humanity of the person behind the anger. Ask yourself, what pain is this person experiencing that's causing them to lash out? This doesn't excuse their actions, but it can shift your perspective, allowing you to respond from a place of understanding rather than defensiveness. For practice strategic silence. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. When someone is angry, especially if they're not open to dialogue, silence can be a profound act of non-fuel. Let their words land without engaging. This doesn't mean ignoring the situation entirely. There may be a time for conversation later, once emotions have cooled. But in the heat of the moment, silence preserves your peace and prevents escalation. 5. Set boundaries without hostility. Letting the fire burn out doesn't mean allowing others to disrespect or abuse you. You can set firm boundaries without adding fuel to the flames. Use calm, assertive language. I understand you're upset, but I won't engage when you're speaking to me this way. Let's revisit this conversation when we're both calm. 6. Redirect the conversation. If appropriate, gently steer the conversation toward constructive dialogue. Acknowledge the person's feelings without validating their anger. I see you're frustrated. Let's figure out how we can resolve this together. This shifts the focus from emotion to solution, depriving the anger of its momentum. The metaphor of the burning coal. The Buddha once offered a powerful metaphor. If you hold on to anger, you're like a man who picks up a burning coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. He's the one who gets burned. When someone hands you a burning coal of anger, you have a choice. You can grab it, letting the flames consume you, or you can let it drop. Letting it drop doesn't mean you're defeated. It means you're wise enough to recognize that engaging with the coal will only hurt you. Similarly, when you refuse to fuel another's anger, you're not allowing yourself to be burned. You're acknowledging that their anger is their responsibility, not yours. You're choosing freedom over entanglement. The long-term benefits of inner freedom. By not engaging with every provocation, you gradually liberate yourself from the tyranny of other people's emotions. You realize that their anger doesn't have to disturb your peace. You become, in a very real sense, emotionally untouchable. Not because you're detached from humanity, but because you've mastered your response to it. Improved relationship. When you stop meeting anger with anger, you transform your relationships. Conflicts become opportunities for growth rather than sources of bitterness. People may initially test you, expecting the same reactive response they're used to. When they don't get it, they often begin to mirror your calm, creating a more peaceful dynamic. 3. Enhanced emotional resilience. Each time you choose not to fuel the fire, you strengthen your emotional resilience. You develop what psychologists call emotional hardiness, the ability to navigate stress and conflict without being overwhelmed. This resilience serves you not just in interpersonal conflicts, but in all areas of life. Breaking generational cycles. Unaddressed anger has a way of perpetuating itself across generations. Parents who frequently lash out at their children may raise adults who do the same. By choosing not to fuel anger, you interrupt this cycle. You model a different way of handling conflict, one rooted in peace and self-control for those around you. Addressing common concerns. Concern 1. Won't people see me as weak if I don't react? This is a common misconception. In reality, choosing not to engage with anger requires immense strength and self-control. It's far easier to react impulsively than to respond mindfully. When others see you consistently maintaining your peace, they may initially misinterpret it as weakness. Over time, however, they'll recognize it as a form of strength, quiet, unshakable, and powerful. Concern 2. What if the situation requires a firm response? There's a difference between fueling anger and addressing injustice. Letting the fire burn out doesn't mean passivity in the face of wrongdoing. It means responding strategically rather than reactively. You can address issues firmly and assertively without mirroring the anger directed at you. For example, if someone is habitually disrespectful, you might calmly say, "I value our relationship, but I won't tolerate this kind of behavior. Let's find a way to communicate respectfully." Concern 3. I'm afraid my unmet needs will be ignored. Choosing not to fuel anger doesn't mean ignoring your needs. It means communicating them skillfully. Instead of reacting with anger when your needs aren't met, use calm, clear language to express yourself. For example, "I feel overlooked when my ideas aren't considered. I'd appreciate the opportunity to contribute." This approach is more likely to lead to positive change than a reactive outburst. The ripple effect of non-fuel. When you practice letting the fire burn out on its own, you create ripples of change that extend far beyond your immediate interactions. Your calm response can de-escalate conflicts, preventing them from spiraling into something more destructive. You model emotional maturity for others, especially children and those looking to you for guidance. You contribute to a culture that values peace over reactivity, understanding over defensiveness. Moreover, this practice transforms your internal landscape. You develop a deeper sense of security, knowing that your peace isn't at the mercy of other people's moods. You become more resilient, better equipped to handle life's inevitable challenges without losing your center.
Conclusion: mastering the fire within.
The practice of letting the fire burn out on its own isn't about changing others, it's about transforming yourself. It's about recognizing that you have the power to choose how you respond to provocation, to protect your peace, and to break cycles of reactivity. When you master this practice, you become a quiet force for good in a world often dominated by anger and conflict. Lesson 5. Silence is the language of the wise. In a world that equates noise with power and visibility, silence is often misunderstood. It's seen as the absence of speech, Avoid to be filled with opinions and reactions, but Buddhist teachings reveal a deeper truth. Silence is not emptiness. It's a potent force, a language spoken by those who've mastered their minds. Silence is the wise response in a chaotic world, a choice to protect your peace and project strength without words. This lesson explores how embracing silence can transform your life, relationships, and sense of self. Silence as protection. Every time you speak out of reaction, whether to defend, explain, or attack, you hand over control of your emotional state to others. When someone insults you, and you retort, your worth becomes tied to their words. But silence acts as armor. It shields you from absorbing negativity. By choosing not to engage with harmful words, you deprive them of the power to wound you. Imagine facing a barrage of criticism with a still mind. The words hit you like raindrops on a roof, noticeable but incapable of shaking your foundation. This isn't about suppressing your voice, but reserving it for moments that truly matter. Silence as clarity. Words, when unexamined, can betray us. They carry the weight of habit, ego, and unprocessed emotion. Silence creates space for reflection. When you pause before speaking, you filter your thoughts, ensuring your words align with your values and intentions. Have you ever sent a reactive email you later regretted? Silence would have given you time to cool down, to reconsider. It's in these moments of quiet that wisdom emerges. As the Dhammapada states, better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. Silence helps you curate your speech to achieve this peace. Silence as strength. Culturally, silence is sometimes misinterpreted as weakness. But there's a reason Zen masters sit in quiet contemplation. They're embodying inner fortitude. Silence requires self-control, the ability to sit with discomfort without lashing out. It's the calm after the storm, the steady center that commands respect. When you remain silent in the face of provocation, you unsettle those expecting a reaction. Your composure becomes a testament to your mastery over the mind. Think of historical figures like Mahatma Gandhi, whose dignified silence in the face of oppression became a tool for profound social change. The practice of mindful silence. Start small. Begin with moments of silence throughout your day. Before responding in conversations, take 3 deep breaths. Observe how this pause changes the dynamic. In meetings, sit with your thoughts before sharing them. Notice how others react to the space you create. Embrace solitary silence. Spend time alone in silence daily. Turn off screens, music, and podcasts. Sit with your thoughts, allowing discomfort to arise without immediately distracting yourself. This practice builds your tolerance for silence and helps you distinguish between essential and idle speech. Silent listening. Practice active listening without planning your response. When someone speaks, focus fully on their words, tone, and body language. Resist the urge to interrupt or formulate a reply. This not only honors the speaker, but also trains you to engage mindfully when you do speak. Reflective writing. If remaining silent feels challenging initially, channel your thoughts into writing. Journal your reflections on situations where silence would have been beneficial. Over time, this can help you internalize the practice. Overcoming obstacles to silence. Fear of being misunderstood. Silence doesn't mean acquiescence. If needed, clarify your stance later when emotions have settled. For example, I needed time to process before responding, but I want to address this. Social pressure to speak. Cultures vary in their perception of silence. In some contexts, it's respected as wisdom. In others, it's seen as aloofness. Recognize this and adapt mindfully. Your silence is for your peace, not to conform to others' expectations. Internal noise. Even in silence, the mind can chatter. Use practices like meditation to quiet mental noise. Focus on the breath or a mantra to anchor yourself when intrusive thoughts arise. The ripple effect of silence. When you embrace silence, you model a different way of being. Your calm presence can de-escalate conflicts and invite others to reflect. In group settings, your silence can create space for quieter voices to emerge. Over time, you become a refuge, a person others associate with stability and peace. Silence isn't just personal, it's a gift to your community. Conclusion: the quiet revolution. Silence is a radical act in a noisy world. It's the language of the self-assured, the emotionally intelligent, and the spiritually grounded. By choosing silence, you reclaim agency over your words and emotions. You become a person who speaks not to fill space, but to illuminate it. In the next lesson, we'll explore how acceptance, embracing reality as it is, complements silence, creating a foundation for lasting inner freedom. Final thoughts: embodying Buddhist wisdom for a life of unshakable peace. As we conclude this profound exploration of Buddhist teachings, it's essential to reflect on the transformative journey we've undertaken. We've delved into the essence of detachment, mastering the mind through observation and silence, and embracing the power of acceptance. Each lesson builds upon the previous one, creating a comprehensive framework for cultivating inner peace and becoming untriggerable in a world brimming with chaos. These teachings are not merely theoretical concepts, but practical tools for transformation. They invite you to shift your perspective, to redefine your relationship with suffering, and to discover a wellspring of peace within yourself. By integrating these principles: detachment, mindful observation, the pause, non-reaction, silence, and acceptance, you embark on a lifelong journey of growth and self-mastery. Remember that this path is not about perfection, but about consistent practice and returning to your center every time you choose not to react, to observe without absorbing, to pause before responding, to embrace silence, or to accept reality as it is. You're strengthening your inner reservoir of peace. As you continue on this path, may you carry these teachings with you into every moment of your life. May you become a beacon of calm in a turbulent world, a testament to the profound wisdom that lies within each of us. If these teachings have resonated with you, if you found value in this journey toward inner peace and mastery, we invite you to share this wisdom with others who may benefit from it. The Buddha's words are not meant to be hoarded, but to be shared, spreading like ripples across a pond. By sharing these teachings, you become a vessel of compassion and understanding, helping others discover the path to peace. And if you're eager to continue exploring this journey, to delve deeper into the richness of Buddhist wisdom, we warmly invite you to subscribe to our channel. Each new lesson builds upon the last, guiding you further into the heart of transformation. May your path be illuminated by wisdom, guided by compassion, and anchored in peace.